I'm Michael Haugh, VP of Product Marketing, and in this segment, we're going to talk to something really interesting about how Network RPA tasks can be built. Because when it's pre-built, it's great, especially if what you need is there. And we're talking about automating the automation. If you're automating Gluware, the components like inventory and drift and config changes and other things, those tasks are there. However, Jeremy and others have raised great points. Well, what about this? And how do I integrate an additional API, or how do I do something custom? And we're going to dive into the wild world of Gluware Lab. And so with that introduction, we'll kind of jump right into it. When you think about Gluware as really as a platform with two primary components. On the right-hand side, you have what we call Gluware Control, which is again, it's a multi-tenant system. It is installed either on-prem or it can run in the cloud, and it can be a distributed system running on the proper compute you need to execute automation at scale, even in like very large-scale global networks. So that's Gluware Control. That's your production instance that folks are going in and automating on every day. Then you have the Gluware Lab side. Gluware Lab is an IDE, an integrated development environment that's built on top of the well-known Eclipse framework. So most folks who've been developers in their past or have gone down that path in any way have bumped into Eclipse one way or another. Our implementation on top of Eclipse is kind of an all-in-one. You don't have to learn databasing. You don't have to learn how to build a UI. It's lightweight coding. It is a low code, but you are working in JSON-based data modeling and JavaScript-based programming logic, or your business logic side of it. So there's really those two main constructs, and you're going to see that in the demo. With Lab, you can do really almost anything. When years back, when we didn't offer Lab to the customer base, Gluware was perceived to be a closed system. And a lot of large organizations who have some programming capability or were used to using open source, even if they did or didn't need it to be open, they want it to be open. And what Gluware Lab really opens up the system so that you have full control of custom data modeling, custom abstractions. You can customize network features, and we'll take a little bit of a look at that, although it's not the focus in this. You can build workflows today. We have a first generation type of workflow approach where the workflow has to be pre-built. Everything is there and it's kind of more wizard oriented, like next, finish. And then we have Network RPA, which we've been presenting on the last few segments, that introduces this building block approach where you have a library of tasks and you drag and drop them into your automation and you're off and running. Well, a key component just enabled recently, ahead of our launch of Network RPA, is the ability to build those custom tasks. So if you want something that's not in the system and your organization has the capacity of low code, right? I got trained up in about an hour, and you'll see me run the demo. I think that, literally a couple hours of training, even your average network engineer could be fairly dangerous with Gluware Lab. The final piece of it, and you're kind of see two sides of this. I know it's saying automation and dangerous is probably not a good thing to say together, right? The other piece of this, so you're going to see the building of tasks. And by this point, if you've been watching the sessions, you've seen Network RPA, understand how tasks show up and they become a drag and drop element. And then there's a form fill for any user input. Well, there's another important component of it if that task is controlling APIs. So Gluware has already had in the product the ability to onboard any RESTful API, or really any programmatic interface. We've done SOAP in the past, and we've done other more obscure things, when it comes to various networking technologies. But what Gluware offers is something called a REST development kit, an RDK, which allows us to rapidly onboard the API calls. And then the RDK, you build a class, which becomes your library to then execute those API calls. It's really an elegant solution. Our co-founder and chief science officer would have loved to present this himself because it's very proud of some great work. It's really lightweight. When you look at trying to consume an API or code around an API, and you look at like the Python developers kit or whatever, that's not, as a non-programmer, that's not for me. I've looked at some of these development kits, and you get into the weeds very, very quickly. What Gluware Lab offers through the REST development kit is that lightweight minimum coding that wraps around it. He likes to say kind of like one line of code for one API call. It's a very low overhead in terms of onboarding and integrating. We're also leveraging technologies like Swagger and Open API specification to where you can ingest from a REST endpoint the calls, and then I think there's a little bit of misnomer when you have Swagger and Open API that you just ingest it and it works. It's application programming interface, right? I mean, you can't forget that part of it. If you're going down the API path in the API world, there's a little bit of programming around it because we're just talking about the data engineering problem. Variables in, variables out, what format, how are you handling them, where are you storing them, all those sorts of things. And with Gluware and Gluware Lab, a lot of the kind of the overhead of it all is taken care of for you. And whatever you're creating in lab, you can fully test it and validate it in lab. You then package it and deploy it into your Gluware Control system. So as soon as you're happy with that development, you package it, send it up, operations has it, and they can automate with that and the no-code environment. So to depict this a little bit further, and just to say pick on terminology, because when I'm talking about Network RPA, I was using the term net DevOps. When I put net in the front, your network engineer is leading the effort, and ideally it's no code. It's kind of drag and drop, and let me use my network engineering skill set. As soon as I put dev in the front, there's a development aspect of it. So I don't want to kind of, let's say, sugarcoat it, or I hear other vendors say, oh, low code. There is the coding aspect of it, and there is going to be different people within your organization that adopt to that, and there's others that don't. And we've had it many times when we train up customers and we figure out, who's going to be a lab user or who is not. It really is that you have that propensity, that kind of like coding skill set. So with that, now we're talking about design and build, test and deploy, which is happening on the Gluware Lab side. But once you deploy it, you're then operating it and monitoring it on the Gluware Control side. And if you're a Network RPA over there, because you now have it as a drag and drop element, you could be doing the build, test, design on in network. So we're kind of like interweaving these a little bit, but I think this is important because it really talks to the culture of your organization. We have quite a few customers who are happy with Gluware out of the box applications and solutions. And as we sell into the bigger, the large financials and large pharmaceuticals, they have the capacity to program, and they want to customize. And we even have a cutting edge insurance company that has presented on our behalf that automated EVP and VXLAN. And the key turning point for him was when he saw Gluware Lab and the fact that he could customize his own abstraction and customize it, and then wrap it with a programmatic interface where in their environment they use GitLab as CI/CD. The developer CI/CD pipeline could programmatically call Gluware and add VLANs to their EVP and Fabric. Then he was sold, and he was using legacy automation and trying self-build. And
I'm sorry, you said this was a developer or a network engineer?
He was a network engineer that taught himself Python and was trying to become a programmer. But what he realized was that the overhead of it all, that the building of it, and then to make it actually resilient, doing the pre-checks and the post-checks, he's like, I could do it if I had unlimited time and kind of unlimited budget. But he decided to go the productized route with Gluware because it offered the best of both worlds. It had the capability and the inherent automation, but it also had the openness for him to customize it. It was doing Juniper EVP and VXLAN and doing some of the specific options. And there weren't other products in the marketplace that supported his specific implementation. And I think that's the kind of the problem when you see a lot of pre-built automation. You have to fit within the bounds of what that product or that workflow or that wizard does. And I think that's where and a lot of, I won't mention all the vendor products, but a lot of vendor products fit into that category. If you're going to automate, you got to automate from the start, kind of greenfield, and follow our guidelines on design, or essentially you can't automate with our product. And he found that with Contrail, what happened to be in that case, because it was Juniper. So In this demonstration, I'm just going to focus on something very, I want to keep the demo simple so you see how Gluware is programmatically interacting with something that we've done a lot of work with, which is ServiceNow, probably one of the most common ITSMs we run into out there. So basically, you're going to see how we're using Gluware Lab to build, test, deploy the integration, and that integration becomes a task in Network RPA, and then we're able to integrate and use it. So here I am in Gluware Lab. And what I want to highlight in Gluware Lab is there are two primary constructs that you work with. A J-type, which is, I'm just doing an example of it. And basically the concept of a J-type is that you're creating abstractions. An abstraction is generally a form fill of some type that is capturing user input. And the form fills are actually a really, the so-called is the user interface portion of it. This is where you could implement really stringent controls. And this is, a side note on this is that when Gluware automates on top of third-party SDN technologies, and we showed Meraki, and we did Tech Field Day for Cisco Live last year with the team, and we showed Gluware automating Meraki and Viptela, which is Cisco SD-WAN, and then we automated on top of Terraform, we automated AWS. One of the big reasons to do third-party automation on top of SDN is if you go into that SDN interface, the web browser, even AWS, you saw Tim navigating around, it's a lot of clicks in to get to the thing you're trying to do. Adding an IP helper on a VLAN in a Meraki was something like 12 clicks in. The other challenge with that is in those UIs, they expose everything that's supported by the product. So you might not use 90% of the features shown to you on some form, but you want to click one option, but the vendor has to expose to you every field on that form. When you do custom abstraction, like this is a pretty simple example, but this is a form fill to capture adding an ACL entry. And just for tying things together, this type, this J-type, if we converted Tim's demo to Gluware natively automating AWS, we could capture your input of the variables on your AWS ACL right here. Like we could capture the variables natively, pass it to our own native API calls to AWS. That would have been.
Let me dig into that, because that was going to be a question. When a user is presented with this form fill, will it dynamically, can it be like dynamically going to AWS to pull what is current and active, much in the same way that the device inventory is like what's current and active? Like, does that dynamic or external fill capability exist? Yes. Yeah.
And the reason is that these fields can render the UI you're seeing, like this is form fill, is rendering right from here. So any change to the form, and that can be fed by an API call. So in the case of SDN technologies, generally we're pulling in their data model, and then we're taking a large data model, and then we might be just exposing the way you use the product. And then let's say you implement something and something changes on that. Gluware is, and you'll see it in the demo here, the way we're wrapped around the API call, we're interfacing with it. So if we get something back from that session, we can update dynamically.
How do you store the credentials that you would need in order to authenticate and interact with external systems like AWS? Do I have to hard code my username, password, tokens, or whatnot? Can you explain that aspect? Because this is one of those kind of spiders under the stone of integration systems.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you'll see in this demo, we kind of took a brute force, just basically provide those variables right within the integration. So I would say it depends on how we've integrated that API. Generally, we want to put it in our integrations page and manage those credentials, and they are encrypted and they're not shown. And anytime at rest they're encrypted, and in transit they're encrypted. We do have Vault committed on the roadmap, which is an important integration, because we kind of want to get away from credential management and just manage the keys.
Yeah.
So Vault is an important part that we're probably 1 or 2 releases away from productizing the Vault integration, because that's really where we want to go. But right now we handle the credential management and we encrypt it.
Cool.
So yeah.
Great.
So kind of building on that, if you go through something like this and use AWS as our example, and you're going to have maybe a drop down, just for sake of argument, to select a VPC or something like that, can you actually have that then based on the user that's seeing a form? So I might be able to see, a production network, somebody else sees a dev network. Can you actually, single sign on, or however you would do that, but actually base what people see on their specific permissions?
Yeah, so the way we do it today is we have role-based access control. And then through role-based access control, if we're talking about workflows, you have 5 different levels of workflows. And so right now, it wouldn't be granular to the individual user's credential. It would be to their role. We have, I believe, 5 or 6 different roles, from system developer to, and then the permissions allocated. So what I would do is, and this is into the design of your building, right? And when you're educating your staff that's building workflows, you want to have your level 1 operational workflows and your level 5 or 6, pretty significant change type workflows. You don't want to expose every workflow. I will say this too, Tim and I are signing in with different credentials, and sometimes I leave mine private, so he's not seeing mine, or sometimes, there are ways to kind of, have things to an individual user, but then they would be private. And a big component of Network RPA is kind of the notion of the democratization of the automation, where even if Tim built it, if I have it in the library and it's an approved workflow, I can run it without being a programmer or anything else.
Can you then, if you had a kind of for lack of a better word, like a multi-tenant environment, this person's working on say a finance app, and this person's working on a warehouse app. Yeah. Can those be completely separate stacks where, level 4 and?
Well, there's different ways to divide up the system. We have the notion of an organization, which is, in our world, it's a tenant. So you would go to a drop down and you would select what org you're in. And then everything is very org specific. You could totally limit the workflows in a given organization. Yeah. Jeremy, did you have a?
Yeah. So do you integrate with SSO systems like Okta? And then as a follow-up, even if you don't, would you look at using, there's a standard called SCIM, SCIM, which allows for the syndication of groups. Like in Okta, I can say this is a group. And then another system, say Gluware, rather than me reprovisioning all that information, it's an automatic syndication, so that, if Dan joined the company and he was part of, ballpark operations, and that was just part of Okta, then automatically he gets access to, other systems capabilities through the syndication of SCIM.
Yep.
Or something similar.
So I don't know SCIM offhand from me, and that's not a part of my divided ownership. I haven't been focused on that. So we added in SAML in I think the last major release. So through SAML, I believe you can have single sign-on. So
as far as SCIM, it's not something we support today, but I definitely see these cases.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of conflated two things there. One was single sign-on systems and role-based access grouping. That was my bad.
When Olivier was training me up for this, I have Lab, and I don't use Lab often because it's not part of my regular job role. But I said, what am I going to need to do this? I was again, pinch hitter, not really wanting to take it on, but he sent me 2 files. The first file is what we call the RDK class. This is how Gluware has onboarded the API. And so what I just want to highlight at the top of it is these are the API calls from ServiceNow that we're leveraging. And you can see here there's 5 API calls. And then underneath it is the business logic on how we're programmatically handling that. So Gluware builds this part. We also can train customers, partners. We have a third party that is already just building these. So you need the class, which is kind of the library or the function. Then and this is something that's been in the product a long time because we've been integrating APIs in a long time. What's net new now is that now I can take this project, I can right click on it, and I go to new, and I can say, create a new RPA task. So now we're going to take that underlying ability to interact with an API, and here's all it takes to build an RPA task in Gluware. And so this is info. This is like labeling stuff. So when you see it in RPA, it's going to be called test snow 1. This is just tagging and stuff like that. And then we're doing some variable management right within the JNIB, which is not probably best practice. Usually you're going to manage this stuff. You're going to form fill it. You're going to reference it from another source. This was kind of just down and dirty. Let's put the credentials for this session right in it. What I want to point out is it's actually 5 lines of code that are manipulating the API. So it's really, really lightweight. I'm initiating here and I'm exercising it here. And I can, this particular task can open a change request. And if the change request is already open, in this case, I have the change request record, I'll append or update. So in this example, I'll just say, update, update for May 5. So all I'm doing there is I'm updating the code in an API call, and I save it. And now I could test it. I could fire off this API right now to ServiceNow and update my record. Before I actually do fire it off here, I want to go into ServiceNow. I'll navigate into this change request. Hopefully it's current here. I just want to show you really quickly. This is all real. And the description on this is, hello, Mike, for Network Field Day, right? Now I'm going to take this, what I just built, which is, it's going to become a task, or it is a task, and I'm updating the task. And I publish it from my IDE, which resides on my desktop. I'm going to publish the package to the production instance. So we have automatic version control, some doc, so I just say okay. So this is packaging it, and then this is shipped to the distribution center, which is where we pull packages into Gluware Lab. If you are somehow air-gapped or whatever, you could also wrap it in what we call our capsule, which is a zip file, and you could install it that way as well. It's real light. It's nothing heavy from it's basically text files that make up the definition in our system. So I just pushed it. Now when I go back over to Gluware, I got to get signed in again here. Now what I want to do is like an administrative component, which is I'm going to go to my my solutions manager, and I'm going to go to my available packages. So I sometimes kind of jokingly refer to this as like the Gluware App Store. Like, hey, you have an update for your discovery package. Hey, you have an update for your vendor adapter. You can see a bunch of vendor adapter technologies in here, what we call config modeling kits. And so right in here we have, it's called RPA Demo 1, and I install it into the system. What I want to show you is that as you go into your workflow and you go into your edit, those tasks become available, and you're right back to your drag and drop ability to take that programmatic interaction and integrate it right into a workflow. And this worked for me every time I ran it, and of course until the live demo. But basically, I have Gluware Lab here, and so these test snow packages are in here. You drag and drop it in, and you're off and running, and you have a new API integration. And then if I want to make it fancier, I tie it to a JType, which is a form fill user, capturing the user variables, and you can get into the kind of the variable in, variable out management that you typically are going to do with an API connection. So I could try to troubleshoot. I don't think it's necessary to go down that path. What I will do, just for completion's sake, is that when you execute these, you can also run it right from within this lab. What normally you would do is run it to make sure it runs within lab and determine, in this case. So It ran without a problem here. Let me navigate back, and you see. So I ran from lab and I executed that JNIB, which is that API interaction, and it updated ServiceNow. So the issue I was having there was in the packaging and deployment into, and this is not our UI. This is the API one that Tim was doing. That's his error, not my error. I'll publish the package, and I got to just double check. It was, I should have looked at, apologize here. Maybe I wasn't doing the right one. It's called RPA demo package. Okay, maybe I clicked on the wrong one. Got to pay attention to your labels, right? Yeah, I think what I did last time was I may have installed the wrong one, not sure. Was trying to talk and type at the same time, install. Let's see if this one executes complete. Still a package error. So there's something I need to troubleshoot there, but you can see the kind of the capabilities here, and it really just opens up a whole world of kind of that custom API integration that there's always another thing to integrate, right? And so hopefully you see the value in Gluware Lab with its no-code approach, Gluware Network RPA and the no-code approach, Gluware Lab with the low-code approach, and how the two are complementary to get hopefully where you need to go in your enterprise. So with that.